the community connect, I think, is a critical part in an educational institution that is ideal in a sense. It's really about being learner centered. It's about putting the learner at the center of all decision making that you do, and also sort of look at, would you want your child, or would you want your learner to experience this kind of learning process.
So today we are joined in conversation by Mr. Aakash Sethi, who has nearly 2 decades of experience in education and youth development programs. He has served in leadership roles in organizations like AIESEC, Ambuja Cements, Microsoft, and International Youth Foundation, where he designed, implemented, and monitored multi-stakeholder partnerships, and has engaged in developing networks for knowledge creation and policy advocacy in education, corporate responsibility, and technology for development. He is currently the CEO of Quest Alliance that promotes the use of ICT in schools and vocational training to develop self-learning pathways for children and youth, and is an Asia 21 Fellow and serves on the board of Science Meets Dharma, a Tibetan not-for-profit trust promoting science education for Tibetan monks. Thank you so much for joining us, Akash. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you, and looking forward to the conversation.
Same here. And just to begin with the conversation, so what is the idea of an ideal education institution as per you, and what do you feel is still missing from us to reach that point where the education system provides the kind of outcomes that we envision it to provide?
Yeah, so I think in our work and our understanding is that an educational institution really is a learning ecosystem that it needs to create, which connects really the learner, the facilitator or the teacher, the parents, alumni, the community, and industry. All of these are key influencers in any learning process, and an ideal education system really connects all these stakeholders and allows learning to take place, or exchange of learning to take place between these stakeholders, right? So that's one key ingredient of a learning institution, where you are networked with all these influencers and stakeholders. I think the other is really to be able to create the right learning environment, right, where learning happens without fear for the learner, without any judgment. They can try new things, they can fail, they can choose things that are of their interest. So I think in this kind of paradigm of an ideal learning institution, the role that an educator plays, the role that the leader of that institution plays, is really critical, where you start treating learners as equal, and you start becoming learners or co-learners in the process, where your power as an educator and as a leader is not to direct learners, but to co-create knowledge, to co-create learning with the learners. So that is a key kind of factor in a key in a educational institution, where you're creating the right learning environment, and this could be everything from the way teaching happens, but also the way the infrastructure, for example, supports that teaching learning process. uh, so yeah, it's really a mix of these things. And I think finally, like I mentioned earlier, the connect with the community. Each institute is situated in a different context, in a different geography. It has its own community. These could be people who are like a local potter in a small village in Bihar can also be part of the learning process for children, if he or she is engaged in the learning process meaningfully, where they can teach how mathematical concepts through the potter's wheel, for example. So the community connect, I think, is a critical part in an educational institution that is ideal in a sense.
Perfect. And talking about the 2 points that you just mentioned here. So one being creating a, I would say, conducive learning environment, and second being that bringing the teachers at par with the students as a stakeholder in the learning process. So my next question would be that Quest, as the organization that you're heading, so how is it bringing experiential learning to the forefront and reimagining learning not only for just the students but as well as for the teachers also? And what are some of the interventions specifically in the space that you're running currently?
Yeah, so I think our work has been in the area of how to get young people to transition from school to work, right? So you want to be able to ensure that young people are able to find the right kind of careers at the end of the process, and also ability to lead life in a meaningful way. So it's a holistic approach. The interventions really start with at a young age, in grade 5 to 8, where we look at the Anand Shala model, which is really creating joyful learning spaces. This could be by ensuring that children who are most at risk of dropping out, or the children who demonstrate indicators around poor attendance, poor course performance, and a kind of behavior in the classroom which is not engaging or not engaged in the classroom, we are able to identify those learners at the beginning of the school year. We are able to provide them with sort of the psycho-emotional support they need by making home visits, by getting their parents more involved, by encouraging them to participate in the school activities outside of the curriculum. So that's one part of what we believe is essential. The second is really creating what we call the enrichment class, which is the last class of every day, where learners can learn through art, sports, community problem solving. So that's another aspect which we focus on, to create enrichment programs inside the classroom. Um, the second So in order to do this, actually, before I go to the second one, in order to do this, we work with teachers, we work with headmasters, and we work with CRCs, who are the cluster resource persons in Bihar and Jharkhand. In particular, we work in 2 districts to look at how can we introduce this at a systemic level, these kind of interventions. So that's kind of the first program that we have. The second one is with respect to secondary schools, where as young people are getting to more and more, burdened with performance, becomes a big challenge to perform well in math, science, uh, especially given your 10th standard exams. We focus on 21st century skills. So these are communication, critical thinking, problem solving, and decision making. And in this, we basically introduce learners to coding, to gender stereotypes, to career planning and career awareness, and life skills, which basically a combination of these, especially for girls, so that they can plan their careers better. They can understand role models that are relatable, especially girls who need to also participate in science and technology based careers. We feel that's we need to break stereotypes for girls to also enter the science, technology, engineering, maths field. So that intervention is around 1,000 schools spread across 7 states, in partnership with the state governments, in partnership with IBM, to be able to bring this 21st century skills. And there we are seeing that if we focus on 21st century skills, there may be an indirect impact on the learning levels that they have, because they get confidence in learning itself. So you break the fear of learning, you start getting them more engaged in the learning process by thinking about real world problems, by asking questions, and that has a direct impact on their performance on other subjects. Their parents start looking at them differently. When they present these projects to parents, they did not realize that their kids are capable of solving real world problems using technology. So that creates a real shift in the mindsets of parents, where they start believing in young people more than what they did before. um, and the third piece of work that we do is to get young people who are studying vocational training, vocational courses, to uh, to prepare them for jobs. Now these are in ITIs, the Industrial Training Institutes, and the vocational training institutes, which are run by community-based organizations, non-profits, who are preparing young people for the service sector jobs. So there we have about 300 hours of digital content that is delivered in a blended learning format, and that curriculum basically adds on to the technical skills that are being taught in these vocational training and industrial training institutes, where the focus again on 21st century skills, so that the future of work is uncertain. You'll have to upskill, reskill yourself continuously, and through the interventions of a blended learning curriculum, we are able to put the kind of onus on the learner to learn what they feel is important to them, to help them understand that based on the different goals that they have about their careers, they need to be able to learn different 21st century skills. And the most important part in that is, can the teachers and the educators, like you said, are able to facilitate this kind of learning, where you're not kind of being the sage on the stage but the guide on the side. And that shift in teachers and educators we do through our online blended learning program called Master Coach. What Master Coach allows is, in a 4-month experiential learning program for teachers, it helps them understand what are they doing, why are they doing what they are doing, how do they understand their learners better, the challenges that the learners face. So building empathy with the learner, understanding what does it mean to facilitate classroom learning experiences that are a blend of technology and human interaction, and what is the future of work and how is it changing. So all of these concepts are brought to an educator in a 4 module program that we have implemented, and we are working with almost 750 ITIs across 7 states right now, close to 5,000 teachers. And all of this is part of our digital platform called the Quest app, which has close to 150,000 learners right now, and almost 35 NGO partners who are also using the platform to train learners. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the school to work spectrum. We are working with the Ministry of Skills to take this digital content to all the 2.5 million learners in India. Yeah, that's kind of a very quick summary of what we are doing.
Well, I would say it's kind of a comprehensive summary covering like multiple aspects, not just leaving them at learning or, putting them into schools, but also connecting them to employability as well as empowering teachers at the same time. So now another point that comes to mind when we talk about education as a system is about assessment. So if you could also shed some light on how do you assess your programs? So like you also touched upon like the aspects of, attendance or something like presence of students in the classroom, but is there any other models that you deploy to assess the progress or the completion of your programs?
Yes, so I think assessment is really at 2 levels. One, at the level of the learner, what we really want to assess is if they have been able to improve their 21st century skills. So, communication, what the 4 skills I mentioned: communication, decision making, problem solving, building meaningful relationships, critical thinking. These are some of the things. Now, how do we do this? So we have digital modules and each digital module also has a digital assessment. So this digital assessment is based on the knowledge that they have gained from the digital module. So that's one level of assessment where we check for knowledge. The second is in terms of the teacher's observation on students, and that is done based on their participation in the classroom and the learning process. So, if a learner is engaging actively, if they are asking questions, then teachers twice in the course of the module fill in a student participation form, which helps us track, and the teacher also track the participation. And the third is really performance in a real world kind of project or a real world application. So this is where students do projects based on the different areas of their choice, of the careers they are interested in. So this is a real world project where they go interview different professionals from their community. They do projects like solving community problems, whether there are challenges that girls face with respect to getting sanitary pads, or water is a issue in the community. So they ideate on how to solve those problems. They build solutions, and then they get feedback from the teachers, from their peers. So this project also becomes a way to assess their ability to solve real world problems. So that basically, those are the three levels in a sense that we are assessing. Of course, there is things like course completion. How many lessons are a student completing? All of that is tracked on the digital platform quite seamlessly, because the back end does the tracking for us. um, so yeah, those are the three metrics, which is basically course completion, the course knowledge that they have gained, the course participation, and real world problem solving. And based on that, they get different badges on the platform, which also allows them to know where their peers are, where they are, and are part of understanding that learning happens in in a community with peers, etc. So yeah. And the other is really which our teams really assess the learning centers that we are working in. So we don't run our own learning centers. We partner with government, we partner with NGOs who are running it. So we assess whether the learning center is creating the right learning environment for the student. So this is where we are able to look at the skills of the teacher, the educator, whether they are being the 21st century educator, whether the leader in that institute is asking the right questions to the teachers, is creating the right environment for them to be able to perform their work better. So we are also able to assess the learning institution for, is it innovative, is it bringing new ideas in the form of technology or in the form of connections with community. So that's the other angle in assessment, that you're able to look at student assessment, which is on 21st century skills, and we are able to look at the learning institution as whether it is a self-learning institution, which is what we are assessing.
Great. And you touched upon this one aspect of, creating innovative institutions. And I would say, Akash, your own institution is something that's innovating around the concept of fun by introducing this concept of Anandshalas, if you may, which you've already mentioned a bit about before. But if you could just also elaborate on what and how did the concept come into play, and why focus on fun in learning, and why is it that the other institutions and organizations are not focusing as much on fun, as much on the technical aspects of learning?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think it's the concept of Ananshala, and in a sense fun is really cuts across all our work in a sense. So it's really about being learner centered. It's about putting the learner at the center of all decision making that you do, and also sort of look at, would you want your child, or would you want your learner to experience this kind of learning process? So I think learner centricity is key, and then it becomes easier to make those decisions for whether you're creating fun based learning. I think the key is play. How do you introduce games as a key medium for learning? So a lot of our um, and games and gamification both. So you're able to introduce small activities that learners can do, that teachers can do, to build stronger relationships with the learner. These could be through small energizers, songs, and games that they introduce at the beginning of the class. So it's kind of a warm up before a class that happens. You actually start playing and learning together with your friends and with your teacher, and that's where you start creating a more equitable kind of experience. And then after that happens, there are reflections that we have as part of the learning process. So the experience that children have had, or the young people have had in the classroom, they reflect on that experience, that why was I engaging differently, what was the kind of relationship this was helping me build. So I think reflection is a big part of that process, reflection based on my experience. um, and finally gamification, which is linked to rewards and recognition. If I am able to perform certain things really well, if I'm able to complete a set of lessons fast, or if I am able to get a certain amount of scores, I get badges, I get points, and that badges and points also helps me, helps my intrinsic motivation to an extent, because it allows me to really uh, understand what am I doing well, what am I not doing well, etc. So yeah, that's kind of, I wouldn't call it out for a specific program, but as an overall approach, this is something that we integrate in everything we do.
Interesting. And these concepts like gamification of learning, or say something like providing badges, which also help in assessment at a later stage, also improves the completion rate for the programs. And again, going back to your experience that you've also worked in tech giant like Microsoft. So is there something around technology that, the pandemic, which has pushed for it also in the current times, but is there anything more of an effort required from the institutional end to provide technological advancements in education at a later stage and keep it going? Or do you think it will suffice the way it is currently?
I think a few things we've learned during the pandemic. One is, obviously there is a lot of demand for digital learning now than it ever was. We've been doing this work for 15 years, and oftentimes we were asked the question of, why digital, why technology, and that has changed significantly, as you can imagine. I think the big learning also for us is that you got to use technology for what it is good at, and not to replace the physical space. So oftentimes you've seen a lot of calls, the Zoom calls or Google Meets replace classroom experiences. Now it's hard to completely replace that, but what you can replace is good quality content, for example. And now good quality content which provides feedback, which is engaging, which is interactive, is not easy to create overnight, right? It needs a lot of effort and planning to build good quality content. So I think that's one thing we've learned, that in the last 15 years of creating content, of maybe over 500 hours of content, we've learned that investment in that is critical. You still need a human connect. Now that human connect can come in the form of an online facilitator who can actually push or nudge learners to be more active, to be able to monitor who is doing what and provide personalized support to these online to learners. So the role of an online facilitator is going to be critical in the future. And I think the third is really with respect to access and infrastructure, which we all know that there are challenges that a lot of people have with respect to access to devices, smartphones, or computers in the training institute. So investment in these devices is going to be critical for learning institutions to start building these behaviors. The self-learning behavior building is a journey. You cannot start and expect that from the first day someone will start learning online. So you got to invest in building these behaviors, maybe over a period of time, and then they start becoming more confident to participate in the learning process. So that's another factor, I would say, when it comes to adoption of digital. And it's also the mindsets that we have as adults, that learners can't learn online, that this learning is not meaningful. And so as adults we need to change our own mindsets around what we believe is possible, what we believe learners can do, and what we believe that our own mindsets need to change, which means we need to start learning online. We need to start contributing and sharing our experiences online more and more.
And now, Akash, you've also worked with a lot of these government institutions. Like you said that you're already working in 7 states, along with like a lot of institutions, NGOs, policymakers, and think tanks as well. So what would you say is that something that these organizations in collaboration can do to pool their resources to create better frameworks or more collaborative approaches in the times to come?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at that given all the investment that's happening in CSR, a lot of the government, the same teacher might be getting multiple types of trainings from multiple different stakeholders. And at the end of the day, if they end up spending so much time in trainings or in listening to so many different people, when is it that they get the time to actually teach and reflect on what they are doing? So I think if we keep that at the center of our thinking and say that what is the vision we have for education, what is the vision we have for a learner, what is the vision we have for a teacher, and this needs to be a shared vision between the different stakeholders. So the first point is to be able to have a shared vision for the learner and educator, for all these stakeholders, whether it's government, CSR, NGOs, etc. So once you've been able to do that, then I think there is a need for, at the government level, to be able to say, in order to implement this vision, what is my plan over a 5-year period, and what are the different kinds of inputs and skills that I need to help achieve this vision. So that's where partnerships with existing NGOs, corporates who are offering various kinds of programs needs to be done. And in my experience, I think you need a neutral facilitator who really can bring some of these actors together to align on the common vision, to make the plan, to be able to monitor that plan and achievement against that plan, and being able to bring in the right knowledge and skills at the right time. So yeah, I guess it's a whole new field of collaborative programming that is emerging, and I think there is a lot of learning to be done there, because otherwise you can get lost in egos and logos, and say that whose logo comes up when at what time, which is more important, as opposed to keeping the core vision at the center. So yeah, a little bit of letting go has to happen of different stakeholders saying that it's okay that my logo is not up there. I'm okay with still contributing to something bigger than my program. And we've seen that happen. It can be done if there is a long-term thinking, which is not project based and year on year only, but saying I'm in this for 5 years, I'm in this for 10 years, and I'm going to stay with the problem and solution for a long term. and that's when we can see collaboration and change really happen.
True. I guess that's really well put in terms of, education as a system or a field or a domain itself is something that requires sustainable solutions which can be implemented over time, because the numbers that we're dealing with are pretty huge in a country like India. And as well as the battle of logos and egos might just continue, but then again, we'll have to bring someone in to kind of smoothen the process and, straighten it out. But now coming to the end of the conversation, is there anything else apart from all these, what we've discussed, around bringing collaborative approaches, different type of people, mediating them in conversations around egos or logos, that you feel need to be talked about more in the space?
Um, I think I think there are two things probably which I could add. I think one is at the level of organizations who are working on this problem, how much effort is invested in really investing in their own people, and the organizations that are running these programs oftentimes, I think, get so busy doing a lot of the work in the field or in making a difference, that the well-being of the people that they are employing gets compromised. So I think investing in, and so in a sense the change starts with changing yourself, and you got to really make that a mantra, that if you got to make change outside, you got to make change within every individual, within each organization. You got to invest in people. It's a cliche, but I think it's the only way to transform outside, is only if you transform inside. uh, and I think the other is really the climate crisis, the environmental crisis that we are facing. It's no longer only about social and economic progress, it's also about ecological sustainability. And for everything we do today, we got to keep the planet as much at the center of our thinking, as much as social and economic growth is. So those are the only two things I'd add to this conversation.
Great. And on, I think, that note, we'll close the conversation for today, Akash. It's been a pleasure to have you today with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.